Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some big time games in the Big 12. Definitely some ones that will just outright knock people out of the contention. One that could just put Colorado in a fantastic place to possibly make a run at a CFP, which would be just insane for so many different reasons. But let's jump into a couple of different games going on this upcoming weekend. And I think the biggest thing here I want to talk about is we'll get into a couple of games here throughout it that are going to be huge, but I wanted to talk about some of the top teams in the country, and we'll start with that number 2 team in the country, Ohio State, because they get a little bit of a tune-up. Let's be honest. They're playing Northwestern. They have a little bit of a tune-up as they get into that Indiana game next week, and this one has a little bit of a twist. It is going to be played at Wrigley Field, and if you've seen that field, it barely fits in there. It is going to be really interesting to see any of those toe-tap plays because there's not a lot of room to toe tap, but it's going to be fascinating to watch this game unfold, and I think for Ohio State, it's just about another clean performance. You saw it last week against Purdue. It's about taking care of the ball, running the football very efficiently, getting Will Howard a little bit more comfortable in this pass game, and then more than anything else, really, for the rest of the season for Ohio State, is that O-line. Just make sure that it builds cohesion a little bit more every single week. You're going to have a really tough test against that D-line of Indiana next week, and I think you're going to have to make sure that that O-line is fully ready to go, going downhill, and that run game has to get going as well. So I think they're going to be okay in this game no matter what, really, if I'm being totally honest. But they got some D-lines on the horizon that are going to be absolutely handfuls to deal with. So I think they win this game pretty comfortably, but it's going to be about how they play in it, not necessarily the final score at the end. And then we got this one. This is absolutely massive. Maybe one of the biggest games, maybe one of the most fun games of the weekend. So if you're not planning on watching this one, tune in because it's going to be awesome. But this is a huge game in the AAC, and it might just be the game that decides who faces off against Army at the end of the year in that championship game, because you won't be able to see Army Navy before that game happens. Tulane already has 2 losses on the season, would take their first conference loss here, and Navy would jump over them because of the tiebreaker. You'd be in a really good position if you're Navy to possibly play Army 2 games in a row. And then if you're Tulane, you'd be undefeated. Navy would have 2 losses. It would pretty much be you and Army. There would almost be no way that it would not be that. Now, craziness could happen, of course, but I would bet that if whoever wins this one, I would bet is playing Army at the end of the day in the American Championship and maybe playing for a spot in the CFP. But this game is going to be really, really fun. Both these teams are a little bit run-heavy offenses, but at the end of the day, Tulane has some dudes on the outside. They got Mario Williams, the old Oklahoma and USC receiver. They have I'm blanking on his name, and I very much apologize. Fleming, I cannot remember his first name, but very, very talented player nonetheless. A guy that can get downfield and make some big-time plays for them. They have Shaz Preston. They have a number of guys that are going to be a problem, but more than anyone, it's Mekhi Hughes. He's a remarkable running back for this team, and he is going to be a load for that Navy defense to handle. And then on the other side, you have Blake Horvath. You have Alec Tezka. You have Eli Heidenreich on that Navy offense, and they're a mean group as well. It's going to be a really fun game, kind of like that Arizona State-Kansas State game where they're going to run the ball. It's just about execution at the end of the day. I think Tulane is one of those teams that I think it's just going to be really tough for Navy to keep up offensively. Now, the Tulane defense can be had, so maybe this is just a shootout game where they go totally back and forth all day, but I'm going to give Tulane in this one. I have said it on here before. I think Tulane's the best team in the group of 5 right now, and I think they're going to prove it on Saturday. I think they will go to the American Championship and at least still have that shot at the CFP. Then you got Penn State-Purdue, another game where, let's be honest, it's about just kind of tightening the screws. It's about polishing a lot of different things, and I think the biggest thing here for Penn State is push the ball downfield. You played Washington last week, so you had to be a little bit more conservative. You got the quick touchdown, so no reason to really be aggressive in the pass game. Beat this team by 70 points. Be really aggressive pretty much all game. Let Drew Aller push the ball downfield. Let Drew Aller test out a couple of the things that one way or another, he's going to have to make those plays. One way or another, your wide receivers are going to have to make those plays because we just saw the rankings come out yesterday or 2 days ago. Ole Miss would be coming to your place. You're going to have to score points. You're going to have to hit a couple of those big-time plays. You're going to have to get behind the defense, and right now, it looks like something they just physically cannot do. Purdue would be the team that you could do it against. So test that. Push the ball downfield, be aggressive, open up that offense a little bit, and then maybe just give Katron Allen and Nick Singleton the day off in some ways. Just give them maybe 10 carries each and just let it be a little bit of an easy day for them. Push the ball downfield, be very aggressive in this game. Allow your offense to get a lot of momentum as you head into the back end of this schedule. I know it might be a little bit mean to Purdue. It's just something you got to do, because at some point you're going to have to make those plays through the air, and if you're not ready to make them, you're in a really bad spot. And honestly, more than anything else in this game, if there's any hesitation from Penn State, if there's any worry, if there's any missing, really, in this entire game, you got to be a little bit nervous. But give me Penn State, give them to me minus the points. It's going to be a really fun game, and I think Penn State gets fully back on track and hopefully keeps their CFP hopes alive. And then the game that we talked about on the upset alert meter a little bit earlier in the week, but this is going to be really interesting to watch this one unfold, and it's really just about Notre Dame handling the business they've been handling really since that loss to NIU. They've had a couple of little stumbles here and there, but the offense has really gotten going, and really more than anything, make this one boring if you're Notre Dame. Make sure that no one turns this one on, because this is one of those games that everyone's going to have kind of out of the corner of their eye, making sure they know the score. And if Virginia's, if it's a 7-point game going into the fourth quarter, you'll flip it on, you'll see what happens. Make sure that people never flip it on. That's the goal in this game for Notre Dame. Run the ball, be very aggressive on the ground, and then take your shots when you need them, because kind of like Penn State, you're going to need to make a couple of those plays in some big-time games, maybe probably even against Army next week. You're going to have to make a couple of those big-time plays through the air, so continue to build that confidence with Riley Leonard. But more than anything else, just Virginia is one of the worst teams in the country defending the pass, so you can be a little bit more aggressive. You can push the ball a little bit more. You can maybe be a little bit more risky than you would normally be, and especially against a team that is probably going to need about 2 or 3 turnovers to win this game. You can be a little bit more aggressive. You can be a little bit more out there, and I very much want them to be, because I think they're in a position where right now it's about making a statement. It's about style points in a way. You have an 11-1 Notre Dame with a loss to NIU. You have a 10-2 Tennessee with a loss to Georgia as their most recent one. I don't know. I'm not saying that Notre Dame wouldn't get in. I would expect them to get in. I'm just saying style points can't hurt them at this point. So get the win, push the ball downfield, be a little bit more aggressive, and make sure that no one's turning this one on a little bit later in this one. Then you got Boston College SMU. It's a very, very interesting game. Boston College coming off a huge win last week over Syracuse, where, man, did they run the ball. They were very aggressive on the ground and got 2 guys over 100 yards in that game. SMU coming off a bye and almost been gifted an ACC title berth on a silver platter. Now, they do need to win this game, but if they do, they punch their ticket to Charlotte in their very first year. They only have one more conference game coming up, and they're 1 game up on everyone. So they're in a position where they can lose 1 game and still be okay. They win this one, SMU will be going to Charlotte for the ACC championship. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. And SMU, since Kevin Jennings took over, has just been a different team. The only game that they scored under 30 was Duke, which they scored 28 points, and they gave away the ball 6 times. That is probably not going to happen in this game. It definitely didn't happen against Pitt, because they beat Pitt. Miami lost on the bye week, and now the world is theirs. Now they have all the opening in the world to possibly take this conference by storm and win it in its very first year, and make some Clemson Florida State fans feel a little bit stupid for wanting to kick this team out. But the reality is, it's going to be really interesting to watch this one. The SMU run defense, one of the very best in the country. And Boston College, with all of the craziness going on around Thomas Castellanos, he has left the program. He is going to enter the portal after being benched last week. It is going to be Grayson James at quarterback. They're going to run the ball, and they're going to do it a whole lot. And if you have a top 10 run defense on the other side, I'm going to take SMU. I'm going to take SMU to win this one, punch their ticket to Charlotte, and really take a lot of people by surprise. Not so much myself, if you want to look back at my ACC predictions, but at the end of the day, a really, really talented team, and one where this could be a historic Saturday for SMU. And then you got Louisville-Stanford. This is a really interesting game, and Louisville kind of in the exact same position as South Carolina. They're looking for statement wins. They're looking for wins that really prove a lot to the committee, and also, just on top of that, they do need to make their way up in this conference. They probably do need to win this conference, let's just be totally honest, to make the CFP, but at the end of the day, if they win out, if Pitt were to beat Clemson this upcoming weekend, and Miami falls one more time, Louisville would have a spot in the ACC championship. So there's still some paths here for Louisville to get it done. Obviously, could come to an end this weekend if Clemson were to get the win. But at the end of the day, it's going to be really awesome to watch all of this unfold. And this is one that I think is going to be interesting to watch because Stanford hasn't necessarily been the greatest team in the world by any means. They've missed the mark a lot of different times. Ashton Daniels has been one of the more up and down quarterbacks in the entire country. Thing is, they were able to catch lightning in a bottle when they played Syracuse earlier in the year, and maybe they're able to do it here. That was a really potent passing attack from Syracuse at the time, and they were able to pretty much slow it down. Maybe they can do the same thing to Louisville and put them in a really bad spot. I do think Louisville will be able to win this game, but I think it could get a little bit ugly. I think Stanford has a little bit fight left in the tank, and I think Troy Taylor's going to have those boys ready to go. So I'm going to pick Louisville. Maybe I'll pick Stanford with the point. So I'll pick them to Louisville to win by less than 20 at the very least. And then Boise State, San Jose State. The Ashton Jeanty show goes on the road this week, and it is in prime time. It's right next to UGA, Tennessee, which absolutely stinks. But at the end of the day, he does get a little bit of a marquee spot to show his skills. And frankly, with a lot of guys, with Dylan Gabriel off this week, with Cam Ward off this week, you have an ability to jump back up really to the top of this conversation this week if you can really put on an absolute show. Now, the San Jose State defense is a solid run defense, kind of middle of the road in the country, but doesn't tend to matter. If we're being totally honest, when you play Ashton Jeanty, how good your run defense is or not, it's just, can you get this guy on the ground? Most people just can't. So I'm going to go with Boise State to win this game. I think San Jose State could make this one just a little bit interesting, but I'll pick Boise State to win, and I think Ashton Jeanty puts on a pretty good show for us all. And then BYU is going to play another night game. They're going to keep us up to 2 a.m. once again, but it is going to be Kansas-BYU, a huge game, and right now Kansas is the lead killers, the world killers, I suppose, in the Big 12 right now. They're doing a really, really good job towards the end of the season of getting everything back on track. They just went on the road to Iowa State and claimed another victim. They're looking to get one here. It would be absolutely incredible to watch this unfold, and it would keep them in bowl contention and create a ton of pressure around BYU, because BYU can lose this game and still be in the Big 12 championship. They would be more than fine if they were to fall here. They would still be number one in the conference. They go on the road to Arizona State next week, and if Arizona State were to win this week against Kansas State, that becomes a huge game. That becomes a game that could just decide who goes between BYU and Arizona State to the championship at the end of the day. So this is a huge game for BYU one way or the other. If they win this one, I feel very good about them getting to Arlington. If they lose, then I feel much, much worse about them possibly making that trip to Arlington. And even though they are undefeated right now, we've seen those seasons fall apart in about 8 days. Could happen to BYU here if they're not careful. But for BYU, if they win this game, they're in a really, really good position going forward. For Kansas, it's just about keeping this fan base fully engaged going into 2025. It's just about putting on a crazy performance toward the end of the season, making everyone notice you, and really just getting a little bit of momentum going into that 2025 season. And I think they're going to get it done. I think the magic for BYU comes a little bit to an end this upcoming weekend. They're still alive in the Big 12 race, but I think Kansas gets the one done. I think Jalen Daniels puts on another show, and they get to 4-6 with Colorado next week. So a lot of things can happen for the Kansas Jayhawks over the next little bit, and I think they're going to get a win this weekend. I think they're going to put BYU in a little bit of dire straits, and that Big 12 is going to get yet another twist and turn to it. So it's going to be an awesome week. Cannot wait to break it down and tie up all the loose ends tomorrow, but that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all of the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people doing great work across every single sport you could want. So anything in the world of sports you need, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I'll be back tomorrow to tie some loose ends for this big Week 12.